Episode 1. Franklin's Spark. The soft glow of a lantern flickers in the Venetian night, causing golden ripples across the water. Above, stars twinkle as if whispering secrets to the moon. Bob sits poised by a cafe table near the canal, espresso in hand, his musketeer attire neatly pressed. Next to him, Bento, his ever-faithful Shiba Inu, stares intently at a passing gondola, his ears twitching as though tuned to another frequency entirely. To the casual onlooker, they appear as nothing more than a gentleman and his dog enjoying the serenity of Renaissance Venice. But looks, as we know, can be deceiving. Bob adjusts his feathered hat. "Ah, Venice," he muses, "a haven for thinkers, dreamers, and espresso enthusiasts like myself." Bento huffs softly, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly as the gondola drifts past. Perhaps it is the faint hum of distant energy, or perhaps Bento simply knows that peace is a fleeting luxury. Suddenly, the monocle perched upon Bob's nose flickers to life. The holographic face of the AI assistant materializes before him, her expression as concerned as ever.
"Alert, Bob! A temporal anomaly has been detected. Location, Philadelphia, 1752. Subject, Benjamin Franklin. His experiment with electricity is about to go disastrously awry."
Bob's eyebrows arch with intrigue.
"Disastrous? For Franklin?
Nonsense. The man's a genius. But let it never be said that Bob ignored a historical hiccup. The Time Fort is an unassuming playhouse-like structure tucked discreetly near the cafe, yet beneath its modest exterior lies the power to traverse the very fabric of space and time. Bob crouches by the Time Fort's entrance, carefully measuring Bento's dry and wet dog food into a shimmering metallic bowl. The concoction begins to bubble and spark, the reaction intensifying until steam hisses from the structure's tiny chimney. Bento stands at the threshold, his tail wagging with quiet anticipation. "Ready, Bento!" Bob grins. "Engage temporal drive." The Time Fort begins to shudder, its metallic surface glinting as it slowly sinks into the cobblestones. A vortex of light and sound envelops the pair as the ground beneath them seems to melt away. Within moments, the fort vanishes, leaving the Venetian night eerily silent. As Bob swirls through the tunnel of time and space, he ponders the stakes. If Franklin's experiment were to fail, the discovery of electricity might be delayed, altering the course of technological progress forever. Bento, perched beside Bob, stares into the vortex with an almost uncanny understanding. His ears twitch, as if sensing the threads of time weaving around them. In Philadelphia, 1752, the Time Fort emerges amidst a stormy night, bursting from the ground in a flash of plasma and sparks. Outside, rain pelts the cobblestone streets of colonial Philadelphia, thunder rumbling ominously in the distance. Benjamin Franklin stands in the field ahead, his kite experiment underway. Lightning crackles overhead, and the tension in the air is palpable. But something is wrong. Bento's nose twitches, his sharp instincts catching a discrepancy in the electrical currents around them. Franklin's experiment isn't merely risky, it's about to unleash a surge of uncontrolled energy, endangering both him and the discovery of electricity itself. "Quickly, Bento!" Bob exclaims, retrieving a steampunk taser-like device from his pocket. With precision and flair, he redirects the lightning, channeling it into a nearby grounding rod just as it strikes. The air hums with released energy, and Franklin, though startled, is unharmed. "By Jove!" Franklin exclaims, his wide eyes fixed on Bob, "Who are you, sir?" "A gentleman, a scientist," Bob replies with a bow, "and a staunch advocate for safety in all things electrical." As Bob delivers an engaging explanation of the basics of electricity, Bento quietly scurries around the scene, ensuring every detail aligns perfectly with the timeline. His unsuspecting actions, nudging a grounding rod, pouring at a frayed string, hold the weight of ensuring history unfolds as it should. Back in Venice, the time fort re-emerges with a triumphant flair. Bob sips his espresso once more, the satisfaction of a mission accomplished gleaming in his eyes. "Timeline stabilized," the AI assistant informs him. "Another day, another hiccup averted," Bob muses. But Bento, ever the unsung hero, glances at the Venetian horizon. In his quiet way, he knows the work is never truly done. The study of Bob Thistlethwaite is unlike any other. Beneath the grandeur of gilded globes, parchment maps, and peculiar contraptions, there is always an air of expectancy, as though the walls themselves anticipate the next great adventure. At the center of it all sits Bob, a man of eccentric genius, carefully examining an ancient compass. Bento, his ever-loyal companion, chews on a miniature globe nearby, although to the discerning observer, his watchful eyes suggest he's more aware than he lets on. "Harriet Tubman," Bob mutters, his tone contemplative. "A Titan of courage, Bento. If ever there were a tale worth safeguarding, it is hers." Bento pauses mid-chew, his ears twitching. He may not speak, but there's something in his gaze, a flicker of understanding that Bob, for all his brilliance, seems to miss. The flickering of Bob's monocle snaps him from his thoughts. The holographic AI assistant appears, his expression urgent. "Alert, Bob! Maryland, 1855! Harriet Tubman's mission faces unprecedented danger. If the Underground Railroad falters, the repercussions will ripple through time." Bob's eyes widen. Preposterous! The Underground Railroad is a triumph of the human spirit. Failure is simply not an option. To the time fort, Bento! The journey begins with a practiced flourish. Bob measures an exact portion of Bento's dry and wet dog food, mixing it in the metallic bowl within the time fort. The concoction bubbles ominously, steam hissing as sparks crackle along the surface of the unassuming playhouse-like structure. Bento, always composed, tilts his head, as though preemptively analyzing their next steps. As the time fort begins to shudder, its metallic frame glowing with unearthly energy, Bob claps his hands with delight. "Temporal plasma drive engaged!" he exclaims. The fort melts into the ground, creating a swirling vortex that plunges deep into the earth. The strength of the Underground Railroad lies not only in its courage, but in its secrecy. If Harriet's mission fails, countless lives would be lost to the chains of oppression, and thus the broader fight for freedom may falter. Bento sits motionless beside Bob, his sharp eyes fixed on the unfolding vortex. Though he cannot speak, it is clear he understands the gravity of their mission better than anyone. Maryland, 1855. The time fort erupts into a wooded clearing. its emergence cloaked in the plasma and sparks of temporal energy. Outside, the night is alive with the sounds of rustling leaves and the distant baying of hounds. A tense silence hangs over the air. Harriet Tubman is leading a small group of, quote, fugitives, albeit falsely so called, through the dense forest, their steps as cautious as the weight of their hopes. These lives are on the line. Bob and Bento are painfully aware that every moment counts. Bob steps from the fort with characteristic flamboyance, adjusting his coat as he surveys the scene. "Fear not, Bob Thistlethwaite is at your service." But Harriet's eyes are wary. "Who are you, and how do you know these paths?" she demands. Bob offers a respectful bow. "A friend of freedom, madam," he says simply, "and one who appreciates the elegance of strategy." Bento, however, is already at work. Slipping away into the shadows, the clever Shiba Inu taps into his neural network, coordinating with local Shiba Inus who discreetly aid the Underground Railroad. They mark safe routes with subtle signals, paw prints in soft earth, overturned stones, and leave supplies in strategic locations. Bento's network buzzes with quiet activity, a silent but vital force ensuring Harriet's mission succeeds. Bob uses his gadgets, a steampunk-like device that projects temporary illusions to misdirect the pursuers, creating false trails that lead them astray. Meanwhile, Bento ensures that Harriet's group finds their way to safety, his actions unnoticed but no less heroic. As the group reaches their destination, a safe house illuminated by the dim glow of a candle, Bob turns to Harriet. "Madam Tubman, your courage is unmatched, but even the bravest leaders benefit from a network of support." He demonstrates a simple system of coded communication, using everyday objects like lanterns and quilts to convey complex messages. Harriet listens intently, her sharp mind absorbing every detail. Back in Venice, the time fort re-emerges beneath the glow of a Venetian moon. Bob leans back in his chair, sipping espresso as he gazes out over the canal. "Timeline secured," the gentleman AI assistant informs him. "A noble cause, nobly aided," Bob murmurs. "Now, Bento, a well-deserved rest." But Bento, ever diligent, pulls out a small typewriter. With practiced efficiency, as soon as Bob falls asleep, Bento types a detailed report on the mission's success before curling up for a well-earned nap. But Bento, ever diligent, pulls out a small typewriter. With practiced efficiency, as soon as Bob falls asleep, Bento types a detailed report on the mission's success before curling up for a well-earned nap. In the heart of Venice, beneath the bustling chatter of artisans and the rhythmic lapping of water against stone, lies a workshop unlike any other. It is here that Bob Thistlethwaite, self-proclaimed gentleman scientist, toils away, surrounded by an assortment of peculiar devices. Bento watches from a corner, his intelligent eyes tracking every moment with quiet skepticism. "Albert Einstein," Bob declares, "a genius among geniuses, but even the greatest minds require gentle nudges." Bento tilts his head, his ears perking at the sound of the AI assistant's voice.
"Alert, Bob! Switzerland, 1939. Einstein's research on nuclear fission is accelerating. Potential for catastrophic consequences."
Bob straightens, his expression serious.
"A brilliant mind indeed, but unchecked brilliance. That, Bento, is a recipe for disaster. To the time fort!"
The journey begins as the time fort commences its transformation, sparks and steam enveloping the entirety of the angular stainless steel hull. Bento sniffs the air, his keen instincts already attuned to the mission ahead. While Einstein's work is groundbreaking, the unchecked development of nuclear fission could potentially lead to destruction of unprecedented proportions. The time fort plunges into the swirling vortex of time. Switzerland, 1939. The time fort emerges on the snowy outskirts of Einstein's lab, its arrival marked by a burst of plasma and light. Inside the lab, Einstein is surrounded by chalkboards filled with equations, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. Bob steps forward, his voice breaking the silence.
"Albert, a moment of your time, if you please."
Einstein is startled, but recovers quickly, his curiosity piqued by Bob's unusual appearance.
"Who are you, and how did you arrive here?"
"Oh, call me Bob," he replies with a bow.
"Time traveler, gentleman scientist, and admirer of your work. But I fear your current trajectory may require adjustment."
As Einstein listens skeptically, Bob uses holographic projections to demonstrate the concept of force fields, an alternative application of nuclear energy that emphasizes protection rather than destruction. Einstein's interest deepens as he sees the potential for his work to save lives rather than lose them. Meanwhile, Bento works quietly in the background, coordinating with local Shiba Inus to subtly tweak Einstein's calculations. A misplaced decimal here, an adjusted coefficient there, just enough to steer the research toward a safer path without drawing attention, and just enough research planted firmly to ensure the timeline extending discovery of the force field. Bob and Bento are racing against time in order to prevent the premature development of nuclear weapons, which they know would speed up the timeline in a least desirable manner. Back in Venice, Bob and Bento return triumphant. As Bob reflects on their mission, he turns to Bento with a rare moment of recognition.
"Well done, old friend,"
he says. Bento wags his tail, but quickly returns to his typewriter, quietly ensuring their next mission is ready.